So if a car travels at a total distance over those various times, then we can use D, R, and T to work with that idea. So D stands in this case for distance. D is representative of the distance. R stands for rate. And T stands for time. So distance equals rate times time is a formula you've been hearing for a long time. How many miles did the car drive in the first 3 hours? So to find the total miles in 3 hours, you have to take its time and distance traveled. So it drove 1 hour and was 68 miles. 2.5 hours was 170. At 3 hours, it was 204. So how many miles did the car travel in 3 hours? It traveled 204 miles. What rate was the car traveling in the first 3 hours? Well, we take D equals RT, solve it for rate. So the rate is distance divided by time. So in this case, the rate would be the total distance, which is 204, over the total time, which is 3 hours. So the car's average rate was 204 divided by 3, or 68 miles per hour. Okay, so we are looking at section 3 of chapter 2 today. We're jumping around a little bit because the order of our textbook isn't very cohesive. So I like to do section 3 before section 2. Section 3 is about rates of change and slope. Slope is the ratio of change in the y-coordinate to the corresponding change in the x-coordinate as you move from one point to another along a line. So again, when we were younger and we learned about slope, you kind of learned it as rise over run. And that all came from the idea that you run along the grass. So here's my little stick figure out going for a run. So they're running along the grass as the sun is rising on the horizon. So it was rise over run because the sun rose up as the man ran along. So the slope of the line is the same as rate of change. If you hear me say slope or you hear me say rate of change, they actually mean the same thing. Rate of change is simply the change in a quantity over time. So rate of change, if you're taking physics, is oftentimes referred to as the velocity. In physics, rate of change is the velocity because it is the change in distance over the change in time. When you're driving your vehicle, your speed that you are driving is your rate of change. The equation for slope comes from taking 2 points. So we call those 2 points x1, y1. and x2, y2, and finding the change in their ratios. So slope is the change in the first point with the change in the second point. So you have to match the points to each other. X2 and Y2 sit with each other, and Y1 and X1 sit with each other. Example number 1, we want to look at the constant rate of change given the table. So it says find the rate of change in the temperature for the solution. Since the temperature is changing at a constant rate, that tells me that it is equal. So that tells me I could pick any 2 points. So I could pick 0 and 5. I could pick 2 and 8. I could pick 2 and 12. I could pick 8 and 0. And no matter what selection of points I pick, the rate of change will be the same. So I oftentimes like to use 0 because it's easier to subtract. So in this case, maybe I want to compare 8 and 0. So the slope would be 126.8 minus 143.6 over 8 minus 0. And again, you could have picked any combination. I could have picked 12 and 2, which would have been 118.4 minus 139.4 over 12 minus 2. No matter what selection of points I pick, my slope will always be a negative 2.1. And the units for that come from the table. So Y's were temperature, X was time. So it's always Y over X. So it was the change in temperature, which was degrees Celsius, over the change in time, which is minutes. So what this means is that the temperature is decreasing (2.1 degrees Celsius) every minute. This says that the temperature is decreasing 2.1 degrees Celsius every minute. Average rate of change with respect to sports. So after 30 games, A-Rod had 25 hits. After 100 games, he had 80 hits. What is his average hits per game? So that means the games are my X and hits are Y. So that gives me the point 30, 25, and the second point 100, 80, so that I can find his average which is 80 minus 25 over 100 minus 30. So you get 55 over 70, which is 0.786 hits per game. So what that means is that on average, he has a 78% chance of getting a hit per game. Okay, and then if it's not a word problem, we simply just have to find the slope of the line given 2 points. So this is kind of like my x1, y1. This is my x2, y2. So to find the slope, it's y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1 So everything in black is always the same. It's always the M. It's minus on top, minus on bottom. The division line between them. What's changing is the points you're plugging in. So a -6 minus 7 is -13. A minus turns to a positive. 8 plus 2 is 10. In slope, we like to leave it as fractions. That's why it's helpful to not use a calculator, because if you put this in your calculator, you'd get -1.3. But for slope with lines, we want it to be a fraction. Example B, it would be 2 minus a -2 over 4 minus a -2. So you get 2 plus 2 over 4 plus 2, which is 4 over 6. Now you can reduce your slopes. So 4/6 becomes 2/3. And letter C. Now, you could relabel your points. I could label this as x2, y2, and this as x1, y1. So I could actually find my slope by doing -3 minus a -9 over 0 minus 7 and get 6 over -7, which is the same as -6 over 7. So the order that you subtract them doesn't matter. It just matters that you stack the y2 and x2 and the y1 and x1. We can find the slope from a graph. So what you want to do is pick nice points on your graph. So this first point right here is really nice. That's the point -6, 0. That is called my x-intercept. Over here is a second nice point. That's 0, -3. We call that a y-intercept. So once I have two nice points, I can find my slope. So you have -3 minus 0 over 0 minus a -6. So I get -3 over 6, which is -1/2, which tells me that this graph is going down 1 and over 2, down 1 and over 2, which means this is the point, if that's -6, 0, this is the point -4, -1, and that would be the point -2, -2, which flows to give the point down 1 over 2 of 0, -3. Okay, so your homework is just the following problems in that next page on your packet. You're completing all of those problems. So it's actually, these are a little off. It's 9 to 21.